It was 30 years ago this week that an estimated 1 million Chinese students, workers, and citizens joined the peaceful protests in Tiananmen Square and in over 400 cities throughout China. The people of China were calling for an open dialogue with government officials about corruption, the acceleration of economic and political reform, and the protection of human rights. We remember with sadness and outrage the crackdown that followed as the People's Liberation Army was unleashed on its own people. Some of you in this room were in Tiananmen Square on that day 30 years ago. We know you took great risks. We know you lost friends. And we know you have sacrificed so much in the years since to advance democracy and support the human rights and dignity of all the people of China. I want to thank you for all of your leadership and for your advocacy. One of the most inspiring images in history, as Senator Rubio pointed out, was that lone man standing in the street before the line of tanks on Tiananmen Square. We may never know the name of the tank man, but his act of resistance symbolizes the spirit of Tiananmen that lives on in the hearts and minds of those continuing the struggle in China and abroad. You know, in China, the Tiananmen Mothers is a group of relatives and friends of those killed in June 1989. At risk to themselves, at great risk to themselves, they continue to ask for the right to mourn publicly and call for a full public and independent accounting of all the victims. Ding Xiaoling, the 82-year-old founder of the group, lost her 17-year-old son on that day. Chinese authorities have tried to intimidate and silence her in advance of the 30th anniversary. Official surveillance never ends for her, as she is followed by Chinese security officers every single day. The government fears her memory, her devotion, and her moral standing. In the years since Tiananmen, the human rights situation in China has worsened. Tiananmen was a key turning point as the country moved from the brink of openness and reform to new and evolving methods of repression, including against the Tibetan and Uyghur peoples. Some have described a slow-motion Tiananmen happening in Xinjiang with the ongoing mass internment and surveillance of Uyghurs and other Turkic Muslims. A better path forward was offered by Nobel Peace Prize laureate and Tiananmen student leader Liu Xiaobo, who co-authored Charter 08. Published on December 10, 2008, the 60th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, it called for constitutional government and a respect for human rights. Despite official efforts to censor Charter 08, it was eventually signed by more than 10,000 people. Sadly, Liu Xiaobo spent a total of almost 16 years in prison and died in state custody in 2017. Today in China, the Tiananmen Square massacre is erased from history books, and any mention of it is censored. But we know the spirit of Tiananmen is still alive and well. We know because China's leaders demonstrate their fear of it every single day with their security cameras, censorship, detention centers, and obsession with preventing the people of China from learning the truth. We know the spirit of Tiananmen is alive and well in Hong Kong, where hundreds of thousands of people, as I mentioned earlier, have come together in Victoria Park to hold a candlelight vigil for the victims of the Tiananmen Square massacre. In his famous last statement, "I have no enemies," Liu Xiaobo said, and I quote, "No force can block the thirst for freedom that lies within human nature, and someday China, too, will be a nation of laws where human rights are paramount," end quote. I look forward to that day. And this afternoon, right after this hearing, the United States House of Representatives will consider a resolution to remember the victims of the violent suppression of the democracy protests in Tiananmen Square and throughout China. The resolution calls on the Chinese government to respect the universally recognized human rights of all people living in China and around the world. And I urge all my colleagues in the House to support this resolution. I now yield to the distinguished chair of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Eliot Engel.